Well, I've had a lot of new viewers since the last time I recorded a video like this. This is basically a kind of introduction to my channel and answering a lot of the questions that I get from people, as well as introducing you to all the different resources that are available on the channel and sort of related content. So, my name's Steve Richards. This is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel. And it's named like that because we live by the seaside in Lytham St Anne's. We've got two allotment plots. We've got effectively the perennial plot that my wife looks after, and we've got the year-round plot that I look after, and then we've got a kitchen garden at home. And this channel is all about year-round self-sufficiency in veg and seasonal fruit. And I try to make it as no frills as possible. We don't spend any money on the allotment or the kitchen garden. Everything is funded from a small sort of sliver of the savings off our food bill that we kind of put away in a bank account specifically for investments in the allotment. And so it's all self-funding. I don't spend any real effort, unfortunately, on these videos. I just use my iPhone camera. I just use this little microphone I've got dangling from me here. I do all my editing on the phone. It's really no frills. I don't want to do anything fancy. This is not a big hobby for me, the video making, but I just like to document what I'm doing, and because I think it's moderately interesting. I think that there's a lot of people want to grow more of their own food. We grow all of our own food, not just for Debbie and myself, but also for all of our local family and for a few friends. So I started this gardening lark about 6 years ago when I retired. When I was 52. I retired mainly because of ill health, and I was pretty ill. I'd got adult onset Still's disease and a set of associated things that you kind of get along with these kind of chronic illnesses, things like fibromyalgia and the like. And I was pretty sick. I spent a lot of time on crutches and with a walking stick, and just in a lot of pain, a lot of brain fog. Yeah, anybody who's kind of had kind of chronic arthritis type symptoms probably knows what it feels like. Very unpredictable. I never knew from 1 hour to the next, really, but certainly not from one day to the next, how I would be feeling, which part of my body would be inoperable. And so that unpredictability I found really difficult to cope with at work, and decided that I just wanted to make health my first job effectively, and that's just never possible in the world of work. So retired, got an allotment, designed this allotment plot primarily for ease of working, and I got it in March, and I thought, yeah, this is going to be great. Kind of put thick wood, lots of nice big paths in, thick mulch of wood chips, raised beds. I thought, yeah, this is going to be great. And then the mare's tail came up, the bindweed came up, the ground elder came up, and I realised it wasn't going to be quite as easy as I'd hoped it was going to be. But anyway, it's still not so bad. Now we're at the point where I spend about 10 hours a week on average gardening, a little bit more in April and May, a little bit less in summer and or late autumn and winter and early spring. Debbie spends probably 2 hours a week perhaps on her allotment plot, and in the kitchen garden it's about an hour a week, something like that. So yeah, we think about it being about sort of 14-15 hours between us growing our own food. Grow for between 14 and 20 people depending on the time of year, but only Debbie and I are completely self-sufficient in veg and seasonal fruit. And when I say completely, maybe the odd thing, so maybe Debbie's making a particular recipe that needs loads of cauliflower and we don't happen to have any cauliflower, and so she might go and buy a cauliflower. We don't fret about that, but generally speaking, 99% probably of the food that we grow, the food that we eat, the veg that we eat, we grow ourselves. And we also try to eat a fresh food diet. So we want to sort of duplicate the best of the supermarket experience, but with none of the chemicals and none of the artificial fertilizers and a much richer diet really than you can get from the supermarket. So our aim is to harvest about 30 different types of fresh food from the 4 growing spaces each week, and to eat maybe 20 different types of things each day. So a very varied diet, much more varied really than you can get cost effectively from the supermarket. We want a higher quality diet, higher quality in terms of the freshness of the food, the nutritional content of the food, and the taste of the food, and also its lack of chemicals and as I say, artificial fertilizers and the like. So we think we live like kings and queens, and not everybody agrees. So living this way definitely feels like the good life, and I've created a lot of resources to help other people and myself to do this most effectively. And doing it effectively is pretty important to me. As I say, I don't have a lot of time for gardening. I want to harvest a lot of food. I want to do it very efficiently. I want to do it very cost effectively, and I want to do it very consistently. So let me just talk you through the tools kind of in ease of use order probably. So everything I do is online. I don't do anything on paper, and the reason for that is because it's always changing, always learning. I don't want to be in a position where I've shipped a paper book and then change my mind about 20% of it, and then have to ship another book in order to correct all the things or update all the things that I've learned in the last 2 years, and then another book, etc. I don't want to be on that treadmill. I want to be able to just keep on updating things as I learn about things, and I want to be able to share information in real time about the experiments that I'm doing, the results of those experiments, etc. So it's all online. The best place to go is gardening-ebook.info, and that is my book, and it's got links to all sorts of stuff. So the first thing, and this will be the second link in the description below, and I'll try and get these links in order, is the year-round growing guide. So I've got one guide that goes through each of the months and kind of like an introduction to that month, and then details of what to sow and what to plant in each month. And it's a single article, and it's really easy to follow, and it just kind of gives you an overview to the shape of the year. And I found it really useful. I still refer to it quite frequently myself, and I'm still constantly sort of tweaking it and updating it. It is a little bit tricky to write a single guide because obviously you've got polytunnels, we've got low tunnels, we've got high tunnels, we've got cold frames, and got growing under fleece and just outside. So it's a bit tricky to get one guide to everything. But anyway, that's it as far as I've got it, and that just one article. So the next thing that I've got is my weekly diary, and that's called the Gardening Week, and there's a video component to that, and there's also an article that kind of goes with that. Basically it's just like a photo version of the video. I've put links and bits and pieces into that, and so that is very approachable because it's nice and short and weekly, kind of keeps the momentum going as to what I'm sowing and what I'm planting and all of that, and the problems and sort of delights that I'm enjoying. And then we've got the reference info section of the book. So that is structured monthly, and it goes back in time to previous years and previous months. And that steps you through, let's look at a typical month of March, for example, and it will say, these are all the key videos that I published in March. So I normally do, at the beginning of the month, I do a sowing guide. So this is what I'm sowing in that month. I'll also do a seedling progress video about halfway through the month to show how the things that I sowed that month are getting on, and sometimes the previous month. And then I'll do tour videos for my plot and any other plots or gardens that are kind of showing significant progress. So I don't always do a tour every month for every garden. I always do it for my plot because there's so much going on. And what else do I do? Oh, and I try and do a harvest video so you can see the sorts of things we're harvesting that month. And then I also have a real-time record of what I sowed that month or what I planted that month. And those records are updated, so you can also see what I harvested that month and all of that sort of thing. So that reference information is really useful, and like I say, I use it all the time. I try to make sure that I use everything that I share with you guys. So the next section in the book is the basics section, and in that I try and go through all the basics of gardening. And so in there, there'll be how to plan, how to sow, how to plant, how to look after your plants, how to look after the soil, how to compost, how to make all the basic things, so netted frames, climbing frames, coal frames, low tunnels, and all of those sorts of things. So all the basic stuff that's in every single gardening book, I've just got my version of that in there. And the nice thing about that section is it's all consistent with the rest of the book. So that's why I decided to duplicate that, even though I say it's in every gardening book you pick up. So then I've got a section on year-round growing guides. So in that section, what I try to do is pick a family of veg, for example, spinach, for example, and show you how to grow that all year round. Or I might pick lettuce and grow that all year round, and flowering brassicas and grow those all year round. So those chapters are written in a kind of more article-like, magazine-like sort of way to give you an overview of year-round growing for that particular family of vegetables. Now, I'm not that strict in terms of the family because I find it's quite useful to substitute things. For example, we substitute in midwinter radish with oca. We might substitute in summer true spinach with New Zealand spinach. They're not actually in the same family, but in terms of the way you cook with them or eat them, they are effectively in the same family. So I really like those guides. I've got quite a few still to write. The book is, forever will be, a work in progress. Then I've got the individual growing guides. So they take an individual type of vegetable, for example, Brussels sprouts, and they dive really deep into how to grow Brussels sprouts. All of these sections and chapters of my book are all full of videos and full of embedded content from my database. So my database is always up to date. It's got all the successions of everything that I sow. It's got all of the types of food that we grow. It's got all the varieties of food that we grow. It's got all the sowing records of everything that we grow. So everything that's surfaced in the book related to any of those things is surfaced straight from the database. So it's always bang up to date and it's always consistent across the whole of the book. That's one of the beauties of doing it online. When I started writing this book, I wasn't really sure that I would do individual growing guides because everybody has a section in every gardening book that is effectively these individual growing guides. And I just felt really unmotivated to just repeat that content. But as I started writing them, I realised that there was actually quite a lot of stuff that most gardening books don't really talk about. They don't really talk about how to harvest that veg, for example. They don't really talk about the different ways in which you would treat different successions. So the way you grow Brussels sprouts to harvest them in late spring and summer is quite different to the way that you do it to harvest them in autumn and winter. And so I wanted to really drill into those differences. And so I came up with this model where I describe pretty much every veg that I grow as, first early, a second early, an early main crop, a main crop, and a late crop. There's a few where there's slight differences to that model, but just like with potatoes, the way you grow your first earlies is not the same as the way you grow your late crop. And so I wanted to bring that out. And so all of my individual growing guides are kind of structured in that way. And they're also always focused on that self-sufficiency in fresh veg kind of premise, effectively, that underpins everything that I do in the book. So then I've got a big section all about kind of the 8 steps to self-sufficiency, and that talks you through both the practical aspects of becoming self-sufficient, but also the kind of psychological preparation that you need, and the kind of practice and skills and things like that you need. So it really does start with the basics, like, pick what you're going to be self-sufficient in, because don't try and be self-sufficient in everything from the very beginning. And then what have you got to build in terms of infrastructure in order to be self-sufficient? And then, as I say, kind of the psychological preparation for doing that, because it's not the easiest thing. You've got to learn ways to store, you've got to learn ways to prepare, you've got to learn new techniques for harvesting, and you've got to learn a new way to plan out your meals. So, that's a pretty important section. Loads of other chapters in the book which I won't go into, all about things like adapting to climate change, growing in different growing environments, growing undercover, polytunnel growing, greenhouse growing, all those sorts of things. A bit more about me and my approach to gardening and my sort of philosophy of life and gardening. Loads and loads of chapters, and there'll be more chapters all the time. And then, of course, I've mentioned already my database, and the database lives in the cloud, and I can create shared views onto that database, all sorts of different ones. So, for example, I can get a list of all the flowering brassicas that I've ever sown, or all the flowering brassicas that I recommend, or all the flowering brassicas that are ready for harvest in winter. Any view that you can think of, I can create from that database. I can embed that in the book. I also have a version of that database, a slightly older version, that is available for free for anybody to download and customize and play with. It's recommended only for people who are pretty IT literate, who really want to build their own database, but I'm giving them something to start with. I am planning, no promises, this winter to create a version, an extract effectively, of my existing database, and to kind of customize that for the more general purpose gardener. So at the moment it's highly customized for my needs as a kind of platform that I built the book on top of. And that's not for everybody, obviously, because not everybody wants to build a book on top of a database. So most people just want a way to manage their gardening, quickly and easily. And so I'm just going to take a version of that, customize it, trim it down, simplify it, tidy it up, make lots of videos about it. So hopefully sometime in winter, depends on how bad the weather is. If the weather's really bad in winter, pretty much certain I'll get it done. If the weather's really good in winter, I'm sorry, I'll be cycling and hiking and things, and so it might be next winter. But for now, there is a version you can play with. It's quite nice. I really like it. It's built on top of a platform called Airtable, and it's available on your phone and your tablet and in the web browser, on Windows and on Linux and Mac OS or OS X. Yeah, loads of different options for accessing it, and as I say, you can just take a copy of it with my data or without my data. I recommend taking it with my data, then deleting my data once you've got your mind around it all. So that, I think, is pretty much it. That's an introduction to me, Steve Richards, and the Seaside Kitchen Garden and the Lachlan channel. See you soon.